Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Chen. As you know, the recent shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School has been called the second worst shooting in United States history. Today, we are going to be discussing as to the reason behind why someone would even ever do something like this. We have here Dr. Watson Ho and Dr. Adele Boss, who are going to answer that very question. But first, for those viewers who are unfamiliar with this elementary school shooting, a bit of background information.
On December 14, 2012, 20-year-old Adam Lanza entered Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. He killed 20 students and 6 adult staff members using his mother's rifle. Authorities say it was a Bushmaster XM15 E2S rifle. Before coming to school, evidence shows that he used the same gun to shoot and kill his own mother. And after shooting the individuals from the school, Lanza committed suicide. This is the second deadliest mass shooting by a single individual in American history.
Now, Adam Lanza suffered from various illnesses including autism, Asperger's syndrome, and sensory integration disorder. The reoccurrence of shootings involving individuals with mental illnesses displays a potential link between having a mental illness and being prone to violent behavior. Mental illnesses in general affect reasoning and the ability to make rational decisions. Thus, this event can be generalized into the question, to what extent does reasoning and perception affect aggressive behavior? Our ability to use reasoning is influenced by the mental state of our brain. As various parts of the brain are stimulated, there are obvious changes in emotion and behavior. Such activity can be seen through the brain scans such as the MRI, also known as the magnetic resonance imaging. MRI scans show that the brain between a normal individual and an individual with a mental illness may differ in brain activity. These two individuals will now explain their views on this subject. First, let's look at the perspective that states that there is not a correlation between having a mental illness and aggression. Dr. Abbas, why don't we hear from you first?
Alright, so right after the Sandy Hook incident, many have believed that Adam Lanza's mental illness was the cause for the shooting. However, it is not accurate to make such a hasty generalization because there are maybe numerous other factors that potentially played a role leading up to the incident. Now, there is no hard evidence of Adam's motives for the crime he committed, which also may not be able to be fully understood. The National Autism Organization cautioned against speculation about a link between violence and autism or even Asperger's. The organization said that, and I quote, "There is absolutely no evidence or any reliable research that suggests a linkage between autism and planned violence." They also made a statement that to imply or suggest that some linkage exists is wrong and is harmful to more than 1.5 million law-abiding, nonviolent, and wonderful individuals who live with autism each day. Thus, it is clear and it can be said that there is absolutely no link between Adam Lanza's mental illness and his violent behavior.
Alright, Dr. Ho, how do you feel about what Dr. Abbas just said?
Well, Kevin, I actually completely agree with what Mr. Abbas said. The statement is true because the public cannot just hastily generalize that the cause of an incident like Sandy Hook was caused by a mental illness simply by considering that he had such an illness that he acted with such aggression in this event. In fact, a serious limitation of clinical explanations of violent and disruptive behaviors is that they exclude social and contextual factors that interact to produce violence in clinical settings. Even in treatment units with similar clinical mix, rates of aggressive behaviors are known to differ dramatically. This indicates that mental illness is not a reasonable cause for the occurrence of violence.
Yes, actually, Studies revealed that the majority of violent incidents have important social and structural causes, such as lack of clinical leadership, overcrowding, restrictions in the wards, and even a lack of variety in terms of the activities that they do in these clinical wards. Um, so, in other words, the patient's environments and living routines could have played a major role in their aggressive behavior. Um, but I'm gonna branch off here for just a second. Um, yeah, there's been a recent study actually questioning the accuracy of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. A gentleman named Thomas Insel, the director of the world's largest funding agency for research into mental illness, is actually against categorizing psychiatric disorders according to a person's symptoms. He instead wants mental disorders to be diagnosed more objectively using genetics, brain scans that show abnormal patterns of activity, and just other cognitive testing. Now, Adam Lanza was actually diagnosed using the DCM. What this tells us is that he might not have even had autism or Asperger's syndrome.
Wow. Okay. Everything you gentlemen said was scientifically correct. However, there are many people out there who still believe there is a link between mental illness and violent behavior. Dr. Ho, can you explain to me why that might be the case?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Well, Kevin, it is true that Adam suffered from autism as well as sensory integration disorders. Both of these are said to make victims feel more angry and have anxiety problems. I actually have a video to show everyone that shows a video of how an individual with bipolar disorder chose to react to a situation. This following clip is an excerpt from the movie Silver Linings Playbook.
The whole time you're rooting for this Hemingway guy to survive the war and to be with the woman that he loves, Catherine Barkley.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning, Pat.
And he does. He does. He survives the war. After getting blown up, he survives it, and he escapes to Switzerland with Catherine. You think he ends it there? No! She dies, Dad! I mean, the world's hard enough as it is, guys. Can't somebody say, hey, let's be positive? Let's have a good ending to the story?
Pat, you owe us an apology.
Mom, I can't apologize. I'm not going to apologize for this. You know what I will do? I will apologize on behalf of Ernest Hemingway, because that's who's to blame here.
Yeah, have Ernest Hemingway call us and apologize to us, too.
So, as you saw, most of us wouldn't react this way to that situation. But because this guy shown in the clip had bipolar disorder, he reacted in a much different way than how normal people would have reacted. So, bipolar disorder is a condition in which people experience mood swings between mania and depression. In the video, this can be shown when he experienced a quick outburst of anger when he finds out about the end of the book he was reading, and the end was actually not what he wanted the end to be. This shows that because he had a mental disorder, he was not able to hold back his initial emotions with reason like a normal person like you and I would do. So, a recent national survey published in January found that about 46% of the people agreed that people with serious mental illnesses are by far more dangerous than the general population. About only a third of the respondents said that they would be willing to have a person with a serious mental illness as a neighbor. So you can see here that this shows that a majority of the people think that mental illness is a key contributor to violence. In other words, people's perceptions of what is a mental illness has influenced current views on whether a mental illness would cause any sort of aggression.
Interesting. Dr. Boss, what do you have to say?
Okay, well, many psychiatrists particularly those working in emergency settings, report experiences with violent behavior among the mentally ill. In Canada, for example, where violence in the population is fairly low, many of the psychiatrists are involved in the management and treatment of violent behavior, and actually 50% of them have reported to have been assaulted by a patient at least once. So guys, I guess I could understand why some people say that the mentally ill are more likely to display aggression and violent behavior. However, it is difficult to come to that conclusion when you use such a general term such as mental disorder or mental illness. And the reason for that is that you can't link aggression with every single mental disorder out there. There are a great number of disorders that are argued to have nothing to do with causing violence whatsoever. So instead, um, is actually caused by perception. And Mr. Ho, I believe that is your area of expertise, so I'll give you a turn.
Alright then. Well, an important part of mental health is how you perceive the world around you. A person with poor mental health or a mental disease may perceive things much differently than a mentally healthy person. So basically how perception works is that the sense organs such as sight and hearing receive signals and pass them through the nervous system to the brain, which processes the information, of course. The mind then interprets this information, and there are some built-in filters that help the process. Here, let me give you a scenario. So, let's say, to understand this filter better, you are trying to get some work done for a project, right? Okay? You're in a busy cafe, and it's like work rush hour. And so let's say you can sometimes filter out the background noise of people eating, talking, or the children just screaming, so that you can concentrate and zone in on what you are doing without any distraction. So you see, this ability of you being able to filter out this outside noise is that so-called built-in filter of yours. So in addition, attitudes and emotions can affect the perception process. You may read the implications of what another person says and his body language differently. This depends on if you like the person or not. As for some people, their perception could be distorted by either a physical reason or a mental health issue. So physical distortion is caused by a physical malfunction in the sense organs, nervous systems, or brain that could distort the signal or information. So this would be considered a physical health issue. However, if your memory and range of experiences has created an unhealthy mental state, then this is actually not a physical health issue, but a mental health issue. This means that the brain is functioning as it should, but the information in the brain is haywire. So let's compare this situation to something else we know. Let's say a computer program. So this haywire in the brain is similar to like a bug in a computer program. Let's say the computer works fine, but the program code has problems. So this results in an improper output. A bad experience may become engraved in the brain's program or in the mind, such that the person will not act rationally concerning that or similar experiences. He or she may even have a false perception of information. They say you hear what you want to hear. Yeah, this is true. A person could easily hear words that are completely different than what were actually spoken at the time.
As you can see, there is a physical difference in the brains between an individual with and without a mental illness. In this case, it's autism. There is decreased activity in certain parts of the autistic brain, making the individual incapable of accurately perceiving certain situations or ideas. For example, an autistic patient might perceive a situation as a threat when it is really not, making them react aggressively. However, there is a limitation with using an MRI scan. First off, these types of scans are incapable of detecting changes in neurotransmitter levels, and also there's potential error because there have been cases where not all of the doctors have given the same diagnosis based on the same MRI scan.
To what extent does reason and perception affect aggressive behavior? Well, based on what we've learned today, the extent to which aggression is influenced by reason and perception will be different for each individual. This is due to the fact that every individual controls their emotion and reason on different levels. For example, an individual that is more logical and capable of using more reason will be able to control his or her emotions better. This will lead to less emotional breakdowns or bursts of anger as experienced in the small clip from Silver Linings Playbook. With regards to the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, Adam Lanza was incapable of making a rational decision in response to a stimulus. Now, this could possibly be because of the fact that he had autism and Asperger's syndrome. It could also mean that he misinterpreted and incorrectly perceived what he saw. This will be as a result to alterations in brain activity as well as changes in the release of certain neurotransmitters, which we know cannot be detected by MRI scans. However, in recent studies, this has not been proven to be true. There is no factual evidence of a direct cause and effect relationship between any mental disorder and a tendency to demonstrate violent behavior. There are actually many other examples of recent events where individuals who allegedly had mental illness demonstrated an act of violence on the public. For example, an individual with a mental illness that had a motive to harm the public would be a 17-year-old Oregon teen named Grand Accord. Grand Accord had a mental condition known as PANDA, a rare form of OCD. He was inspired by the 1999 Columbine massacre, and he made pipe bombs, Molotov cocktails, and a napalm bomb that was going to be used in a catastrophic attack that he was going to plan on his school, West Albany High School. He was arrested, however, on Thursday, May 23, 2013, on aggravated murder charges. Another example of an individual with a mental illness that caused harm to the public would be from the shooting that occurred in Aurora, Colorado by James Egan Holmes. James Egan Holmes pleaded that he was mentally ill when he was in court. However, there is no known evidence currently present about his mental condition. James himself has stated that he has dysophoric mania. Dysophoric mania features mania and depression that leads to anxiety, fatigue, and guilt. His lawyers have also claimed that he has seen 3 mental health professionals. As we know, the ability to reason affects to what extent we display aggression in certain situations. In this case, the individual's mental disorder might have affected his ability to reason and his ability to accurately perceive his surroundings correctly. In another case, however, Sung-Ho Choi from Virginia Tech did not have a mental illness that could be diagnosed by the DSM. However, let's take a look at this video and everyone can make their own conclusion whether or not he had a mental problem.
I didn't have to do this. I could have left. I could have fled. But no, I will no longer run. If not for me, for my children, for my brothers and sisters that you I did it for them. You had 100 billion chances and ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. The decision was yours. Now you have blood on your hands that will never wash off. You sadistic snobs, I may be nothing but a piece of You have vandalized my heart, raped my soul, and torched my conscience. You thought it was one pathetic void life you were extinguishing. Thanks to you, I die, like Jesus Christ, to inspire generations of the weak and the defenseless people. Do you know what it feels like to be spit on your face and have trash shoved down your throat? Do you know what it feels like to dig your own grave? Do you know what it feels like to have your throat slashed from ear to ear? Do you know what it feels like to be torched alive? Do you know what it feels like to be humiliated and be impaled upon on a cross and left to bleed to death for your amusement? You have never felt a single ounce of pain your whole life, yet you want to inject as much misery in our lives as you can, just because you can. You had everything you wanted. Your Mercedes wasn't enough, you brats. Your golden necklaces weren't enough, you snobs. Your trust fund wasn't enough. Your vodka and cognac weren't enough. All your debaucheries weren't enough. Those weren't enough to fulfill your hedonistic needs. You had everything. You just loved crucifying me. You loved inducing cancer in my head, terrorizing my heart, and raping my soul all this time. When the time came, I did it. I had to.
Man, this guy's crazy. What do you think about this, Dr. Ho and Dr. Abbas?
Well, I think that this shows that the current method of diagnosis is not completely accurate. It's an obvious weakness in this entire discussion. These killers might not have even had the supposed illness, but his reasoning abilities were obviously obscured in some way or another.
Dr. Ho?
No doubt this individual is abnormal in some way, whether it's a mental issue or he's just socially awkward, what this tells us is that his reasoning, like Dr. Abbas said, is obscured, meaning that all individuals who have a violent illness are not naturally violent. The reason for this could have been caused by the way he was brought up, and as a result, this becomes a matter of nature versus nurture, and in this case, it was definitely nurture, Kevin.
Well, since we're on the topic of nature versus nurture, why don't we go ahead and look at something relevant? The Columbine Massacre. For those who don't know, the Columbine High School Massacre was a school shooting that occurred on April 20th, 1999 at Columbine High School in Columbine, Colorado by two seniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Kelbold. They murdered a total of 12 students and one teacher and injured another 23 students, with 3 additional students being injured while attempting to escape. There have been many conclusions as to why these two seniors had the motive to do what they did. But the two main conclusions address the nature versus nurture we were previously talking about. So Dr. Abbas, why don't you discuss this incident in terms of nature?
Alright, well, the first conclusion of the motives for the two seniors was that they were mentally ill. Harris, who was 18, could be considered actually a psychopath, who was rage-filled, egotistical, and sort of, he seemed like he lacked a conscience. Klebold, on the other hand, who, was 17, he was psychotic and suffered from paranoia. And he had delusions and was had disorganized thinking. To diagnose these conditions listed above, actually 27,000 pages of records from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office were actually observed. As you can see, these symptoms seem like the two individuals actually relied more on their emotion than their reasoning capabilities. With that being said, it is plausible to say that their actions were due to mostly innate causes. On the contrary, there is also the nurture argument. Dr. Ho?
Oh, yeah. Okay, similar to the Virginia Tech incident, the two seniors were not the most popular individuals at the school. According to some sources, they were actually bullied a lot, and this may have developed some bias towards certain individuals at the school, and this probably led to the aggression. Because of this bias, it will impair their reasoning and let their emotion come through, eventually causing the shooting. As a result, in all incidents, the individuals displayed some sort of mental abnormality. It is plausible to say that having some sort of mental issue would influence one's reason and perception. However, it is not accurate for one to use inductive reasoning to make a general conclusion that mental illness does have a correlation with violence based on a few unfortunate events. Nonetheless, it is not 100% certain that these people even had the supposed mental illness due to limitations with the diagnosis process.
We chose this topic because each one of us knows someone who has a mental disorder and is also viewed as different than other people. We have seen these individuals react to situations much differently than any one of us would have. For example, we have an autistic friend who got frustrated one day because his computer was not as fast as the computer of an individual sitting next to him. This friend got up, threw his own computer on the floor, and walked out of the room. When discussing the subject, the debatable issue of what causes this kind of behavior arose. Therefore, we decided to discuss mental disorders and aggression in our presentation through the use of recent real-life situations that have impacted our society.
So before we finish, are there any questions that you guys might want to ask? Yeah, you.
Could you explain further why there are individuals with no mental illness whatsoever, but they still engage in similar acts of violence?
Well, as we said before, the environment where one grows up plays a major factor in determining an individual's behavior in the future. This was the nurture argument we were previously talking about. Assuming that there is a potential link between violence and mental disorders, even though a person does not have a mental illness, what they have seen around them can greatly influence how they respond to future stimuli. Are there any more questions?
Are there any ways to prevent such aggressive behavior as a whole?
Yes and no. It depends on the person because there's no way to control how the person is raised. If the individual is raised in an environment that encourages violent behavior, then it's obvious that he or she will be likely to act in the same way. The only way to decrease chances of such a violent event like we discussed is for those that have mental illnesses to regularly attend some sort of psychiatric therapy. Any other questions?
Yeah. If there is actually a correlation between mental illness and violence, which disorder do you believe has the strongest correlation with aggression?
Well, as of now, there are no way of telling which disorder would have the strongest correlation with aggression, because various disorders cause different changes in the brain, and these changes in the brain may or may not lead to violent behavior. And as said again, there has not been a study that shows a direct correlation between a specific mental disorder and aggression. Alright guys, thank you for coming.
Alright, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.